The tariff tsunami that hits today, not merely an economic instrument, but an earthquake arranged by the White House. Trump's newly arranged tariff regime, which he has grandiosely dubbed Liberation Day, is in fact a declaration of economic war, dressed up in patriotic bunting. Starting this month, a universal 10% tariff will be applied to all US imports with targeted tweaks that will be levied as high as 54% on Chinese goods, 20% on European goods, described as pathetic by the Trump administration. The pathetic European Union, 24% on Japan. These aren't marginal adjustments. This is a single greatest shock to global trade architecture since the end of the Second World War. And Trump frames this as economic self-defense. He invokes the language of reciprocity. They tax us, we tax them. And he claims this will restore America's industrial base, reduce reliance on China, and fund domestic cuts. Frankly, he sounds like Liz Truss in an orange wig. He's even declared a national emergency under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to justify this drastic shift. His rhetoric is both populist and pugilistic, asserting that America has been pillaged and that it is time to take care of our people first. But slogans are not strategies, and tough talk doesn't always lead to smart outcomes. And Wall Street has already given its verdict. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq dropped sharply after the announcement, wiping billions from portfolios. The Federal Reserve is now warning that these tariffs could spike inflation and reduce consumer spending. JP Morgan has forecast a potential recession. Who suffers? American consumers first and foremost. Tariffs are taxes by another name. When tariffs go up, prices go up on clothes, electronics, cars, even groceries. Walmart, Target and other retail giants are already bracing for impact. And meanwhile, American exporters, especially those in agriculture and manufacturing, face retaliation. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, has promised countermeasures. Japan has called the tariffs extremely regrettable. Even close allies like Australia, Canada and the UK are reassessing the nature of their so-called special relationship with Washington. The special relationship, as far as I can say it, is very much like a grumpy old man who kicks the dog and the dog comes back panting for more. And this brings us to a more profound point of trust. The US isn't merely an economic power. It is, or at least it was, the architect of a rules-based international order. Tariffs of this magnitude imposed unilaterally, indiscriminately and suddenly fracture alliances, breed resentment and create incentives for nations to turn elsewhere. Already we see China negotiating with the EU, India strengthening ties with Russia, and even former Anglophone allies talking trade with China's Belt and Road. When America weaponizes its economy, others adapt and diversify, and they won't go back. The message Trump is sending is clear. Even allies can be punished. The UK, post-Brexit and vulnerable, receives no exemptions. We've been lumped in with the rest. That special relationship has become a one-sided affair. Trump barks and Britain rolls over. Please kick us again. But a country whose alliance is no longer reliable is not a friend. It is at best a transaction. And Trump's defenders argue that this is rebalancing, that China, the EU and others have long levied unfair duties and used non-tariff barriers to disadvantage the US. And it's true. Trade has not always been free and fair. But the answer to asymmetry is not retaliation without strategy. A global 10% baseline and selective tariff hikes on dozens of countries, including some of the world's poorest, is less a policy and more a provocation. It doesn't discriminate between strategic rivals and fragile partners. It doesn't account for complex supply chains where American firms manufacture abroad, nor does it account for the cost of American soft power, once a vital currency in global affairs. Trump says these tariffs will bring jobs back, but the world is not the 1950s. Automation, not trade, has done most of the damage to US manufacturing. And building walls, economic or literal, doesn't bring industries home, it merely raises costs and deepens divisions. So, will these tariffs do more harm than good? Are these tariffs suddenly imposed, a little bit like the intelligence that was suddenly shut off to Ukraine? Will Trump rethink in 2 or 3 days? Maybe. But the damage will have been done, as it was done to Ukraine. And yes, these tariffs will hurt the UK, they'll hurt the EU, China, the global south. But will it hurt America? Yes. Also, yes. It will raise domestic prices, invite retaliation, stifle investment, and probably trigger recession. But most of all, it will trigger resentment. The damage globally is far worse than simply an economic bump. Trust is being shattered, alliances frayed, and the US is isolating itself just when it needs friends most. Trump may not be our enemy, but he is no longer our friend. That special relationship has become a parody, a poodle on the mat, hoping for a treat, getting a kick instead, and still coming back for more. That's Keir Starmer. And in the end, economic nationalism may feel good in the moment, but like any drug, the withdrawal will be brutal.